Okay, first I want to thank you all for sitting in and listening to my presentation today. So before I get started, I just want to give you a little bit of a background about what this presentation is over. So I am nearing the end of my guidance counseling master's program. So this is a 3-part class that I'm finishing, and it's a research methodology class. So my research topic was over English language learners and trying to find a successful solution to helping them in the general education classroom. Okay. So the district that I chose was Allen County Scottsville, and the specific school was Allen County Intermediate Center. I conducted a 5-week study within the school that is located in a rural area, and it's the only school in the city, so it's a smaller school district, which is the reasoning for the small participant size. My research question was, does Hyperbird show positive impact in intermediate level ELL students? So Hyperbird is just an app that I downloaded on each of their Chromebooks that was able to translate any quiz or classroom assignment that was put on Google Classroom or on their Chromebook by the general ed classroom teacher. I chose this topic because I had a student in my class last year that spoke very little English, and I felt like we were doing him a disservice because he was having to sit in a regular ed classroom all day and not understand what was happening. And his test scores even showed us that if he was given like a math problem without words, he was able to solve those in the upper percentile levels and do pretty well. But anything that he had to read in English, he really struggled with. So I felt passionate about gearing my 5-week study towards finding a solution for students that are English language learners that attend schools like mine with limited resources and personnel. Again, my research question, does Hyperbird show positive impact in intermediate level ELL students? So, some of the background research that I've done, I didn't put all of it in here because it's a whole lot, but these are kind of some of the high points. English language learners have to meet the criteria of a student who is deemed not proficient in speaking or comprehending English. Once they have been identified as ELL, a team of administration can begin making a plan for a student to receive accommodations that will best suit the student for success in the general education classroom, kind of similar to students with 504 or IEP. A student who is deemed as an ELL student will stay in the ELL program throughout their time in the school system until they have tested out. And even when they have tested out, there is a 2-year post-program exit where they're still monitored. ELL students are protected by the ESEA, which is just the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which pretty much just makes sure that they're getting progress monitored when they need to be and that they have a caseworker on their case. Progress monitoring is required for a student to stay in the ELL program. Important goals and criteria that an ELL student must master in English are in the domains of listening, speaking, writing, reading, and comprehension. And then ELL students are encouraged and expected to advocate for themselves to the best of their developmental ability. So if they were in a general education classroom and they were given something that had a big passage on it, they were expected to ask somebody to read it to them or ask for help. Students were given the Hyperbird app on their Chromebooks and taught how to use it on daily assignments, quizzes, and tests. Hyperbird is an app that will translate student work into their first language, and in this case, it was used for Spanish-speaking students. I met with these students once a week to have them take a quiz or do a classroom assignment in English and Spanish and then compare the scores. I also met with their homeroom teachers weekly to discuss their engagement since they have been using Hyperbird. So I had 2 quantitative data sources. One was quiz data with and without Hyperbird, and the other was classroom assignments with and without Hyperbird. And then I had 1 qualitative data source, and it was being able to meet with our homeroom teachers, which is kind of what's in that packet, and you can look through those scores if you want to. Confidentiality was maintained by keeping all records private with only the researcher and kept in a locked cabinet. This information will be shredded after the study has been completed. Anything that has a participant's name, scores, or any other personal information has been kept confidential to avoid exposing the participant. So due to small population of ELL students in our school, there are only 8 ELL students in the whole building, and out of those 8, only 4 turned in the informed consent. So I only had 4 participants, 2 of which were in 6th grade and 2 were in 5th. So there were 4 participants in the 5-week study. 2 of the participants were female and 2 were male. Both female were 5th grade students. Both families also speak Spanish mainly at home, and one of the female's parents does not speak English at all. Both male participants were 5th grade students. Both male participants' families speak Spanish primarily at home, and none of the participants have exited the ELL program yet. So whenever I broke down the data, I had to break it down into 3 different categories. So effective, ineffective, and inconclusive. So for effective data, when looking at the data models, using Hyperbird on quizzes and classroom assignments showed that out of 1 meeting a week with each student over a 5-week period, that Hyperbird was effective 10 times total for all the students. And Hyperbird was shown to be 100% effective with all 4 participants' engagement when meeting with each participant's homeroom teacher once a week over a 5-week period. All their homeroom teachers agreed that this was something that helped them out a whole lot. For ineffective data, when I looked at it, using Hyperbird was shown to be ineffective on quizzes and classroom assignments only 6 times. So a little bit less, but not too much, with 4 participants over a 5-week period. And then it was inconclusive 4 times over the 5-week period. Some of the biggest limitations for this study was time. I was only able to pull them each once a week for about 45 minutes because that's all the time we had. So, because I was pulling them during their related arts times. So that was just enough time to take a quiz twice, once in English and once in Spanish. And then another limitation was the small participant size. So due to the amount of students who are identified at ELL in our building and lack of students that returned and informed consent to participate. So some questions that raised after looking at the effective data were, was the data effective because of the subject area that the quiz or classroom assignment was from? So I did 1 quiz and 1 classroom assignment from each subject area. So that was one of the questions that I had. Did engagement increase because students were allowed to use Hyperbird without their peers knowing they were receiving an accommodation? So instead of being pulled out of the class, this was something that they used on their own. And then would the study have been more effective if there would have been more participants? So more data to look at, more percentages. What would the data look like if the researcher would have been able to meet with the participants more than once a week? For the ineffective data, did the ineffective data have to do with the subject area that was on the quizzes or classroom assignments? Was the ineffective data due to limited numbers of participants? Did the ineffective data have to do with the amount of times the researcher was able to meet with the participants? And then was the inconclusive data due to the small participant size for the 5-week research study? Was the inconclusive data due to the amount of times the researcher was able to meet with the participants? Or was the inconclusive data due to the fact that participants were able to take the quizzes and classroom assignments twice? These are my references. Do you guys have any questions? Okay.
How did you say that confidentiality was kept?
I kept all their scores and informed consent forms, anything that had their name on it or a score on it, I kept it in a locked cabinet.
Excellent.
So you said they had this in every class, like they didn't get pulled out, they took the test like in the classroom with the rest of them?
Right.
Did they have like headphones?
So it doesn't read to them unless
It just-
they click like the microphone button.
Oh, okay.
It pretty much just takes any worksheet or quiz
Okay.
and changes it to Spanish instead of English. Okay.